Good morning, good morning. Welcome back. A new week. Back in 2 Kings, at the beginning of the week. Chapter 3 today. So let's say a prayer to invite the Holy Spirit to our Bible study. Dear Heavenly Father, oh Lord, thank you so much for all that you do. And thank you for this time we get to spend studying your word. Help me, Father, to be able to learn new things that I haven't known already and be able to help others to see also. In Jesus' precious name I pray. Amen. Okay, the war between Israel, Judah, and Edom are going to get together to take care of a problem with Moab. So that's what this chapter is about. So I got a cool little map here of the events. And not that map. This map. So the northern kingdom capital is in Samaria. So we got that group. And they're going to come down to Jerusalem and pick up Judea. And they're going to head towards, and at some point they're going to get Edom involved. Edom is actually in this area where they're going to be fighting them, as you can see in this map here. Edom is down in this general area here. They're going to get together and go after Moab. You say, why are they going after Moab? Well, Moab's been causing problems ever since the death of Solomon. They thought they'd take this opportunity. Solomon kind of had them under control and somewhat control. They never were like allies, but they were kept at bay. But now to get this divided kingdom, the king of Moab decided to rebel against Israel. So the nations of Israel, Judah, and Edom decided to attack from the wilderness of Edom. Unfortunately, they ran out of water. The three kings consulted Elijah, so the prophet is going to get involved, who said God would send both water and victory. So that was important. That was the main role of prophets back then. They were kind of like the Bible in some ways, because there wasn't a written word yet. A lot of this stuff we read about, they did have the first 5 books of the Bible, but they weren't being published. So it wasn't like they were in large supply, like you go down to the store and buy one. Usually only it was the first, the book of Moses. They were in the temple in Jerusalem, and that was pretty much the only place that you saw them. So actually, it takes it. That's why the synagogue was so important back in those days. When they would go to the synagogue on Saturday, it's when they would actually be read to from the what they call the Tanakh. It's the first 5 books of the Bible. But this part of it, during this particular phase, not everybody went to Jerusalem every week. And so that a lot of the information coming from God to them and directing to them was coming through the prophets. Okay, so I'll start off. Again, I'll read it. I broke it into a few different sections, and we'll start off with who's ruling right now. Is Jeroboam's reign, and we'll look at that first 5 verses. Okay, now Jeroboam the son of Ahab began to reign over Israel and Samaria. So he's the northern kingdom. The 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. So Jehoshaphat's down in Jerusalem, and reigned 12 years. And he wrought evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and like his mother, for he put away the image of Baal that his father had made. He's kind of heading in the right direction, but not completely going all the way. Nevertheless, he cleaved unto the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. So they was still conducting idol-type worship up in the northern part. And Meshach, king of Moab, was a sheep master, and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams with the wool. I'll talk about that here in a few minutes. That's almost like payment. But it came to pass when Ahab was dead that the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So he thought he'd take this opportunity to attack. because even Ahab had better luck controlling him. So even though back in chapter 1, verse 17 says that Jeroboam was king of Israel, we notice here in verse 3:1, let me see what I got here. I've got to put these verses in. Going back to 3:1 for a second. Now Jehoram the son of Ahab began to reign over Israel and Samaria the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, reigned 12 years. It says that Jehoram was the king of Judah, but 3:1 says Jehoshaphat was Judah's king. As a king grew older, often his son would rule beside him. So Jehoshaphat here, nearing the end of his reign, appointed his son Jehoram to rule with him. So Jehoram, also called Joram, served as co-ruler of Judah with Jehoshaphat for 5 years. That was from 853 to 848 BC. He's also mentioned again when we get into chapter 8, verses 16 through 24. And I think I'll read through that section just to give you an idea who he is. In the 5th year of Jehoram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat being the king of Judah, Jehoram the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign. 32 years old was he when he began to reign. He reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as did the house of Ahab. For the daughter of Ahab was his wife, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet the Lord would not destroy Judah for David and his servant's sake, as he promised him to give him away a light unto his children. In his days, Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah and made a king over themselves. So Jehoram went over to Zair and all the chariots with him, and he rose by night and smote the Edomites, which compressed him round about, and the captains of the chariots, and the people fled into their tents. Yet Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah until this day. Then Libani revolted at the same time. And the rest of the acts of Jehoram and all that he did, that they're not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. And Jehoram slept with his father and was buried with his father in the city of David, and Ahijah his son reigned in his stead. So that shows that he did take over for his father when he died. So both Ahab, which we've been reading, which we saw in 1 Kings 16 through 22, and Azariah, 2 Kings 1, 2 through 18, served as kings of Israel before Jehoram. Let me just bring up a quick chart here and I can show you the different kings we're talking about here. So we can Israel and Judah. So here's Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Oh, this is an old. That was even older. Hold on, this one. That's the northern kingdom. What's the one I was thinking of? I got this one too. I don't know if this has it on it or not. Oh yeah, there's Solomon, Abijah, Asa. This is actually Judah, this chart here. Jehoshaphat. And there's Jehoram right there. The ones you see below this line here is following idolatry. And Azariah and Attallah, before we get to a good king again. But we see Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the one that actually caused problems in the beginning of getting away from God. Okay, so back to our verse 2. And he wrought evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father and like his mother, for he put away the image of Baal that his father had made. Looking at 1 Kings 16:30-32. I did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. And it came to pass, as if he had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took to wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethabel, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. So it was actually Jezebel that got him involved. And he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. So that was the one that he tore down. He got rid of that particular one. They didn't completely they didn't completely return to Christ. To God. And also 2 Kings 10. And it came to pass, as soon as he made an end of offering the burnt offering, that Jehu said to the guard and to the captains, "Go in and slay them, let none come forth." And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and the guard and the captain cast them out, and went to the city of the house of Baal. And they brought forth the images out of the house of Baal and burned them. Okay, so this is where they destroyed those Now on to verse 3. Nevertheless, he cleaved unto the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefore. So the sins of Israel's kings are often compared to the sins of Jeroboam, the first ruler of the northern kingdom of Israel. His great sin was to institute idol worship throughout his kingdom, causing people to turn away from God. Now, Jeroboam was the northern kingdom. And he was the original one to set up those idol worships in two different places in Israel, so that people would not go south to Jerusalem. By ignoring us, as we see mentioned in 1 Kings 12. Okay. Then Jeroboam built Shechem and Mount Ephraim and dwelt therein. Let me bring the map back so I know where these places are. And Shechem, I don't know if it's on this map or not. It's in this area right here, right where about the A in Israel is. And Mount Ephraim, and dwelt therein, and went out from thence and built Peniel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, "Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David." So if the people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of the people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam king of Judah. So this was what he was afraid of. He was afraid of people that were part of his portion of the kingdom in the north would go down to Jerusalem and be enticed to move back down there. So he was trying to stop that by providing places to worship in the northern kingdom. Well, that in God's eyes is considered idol worship. Verse 28. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, "It is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt." And he set the one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. Bethel is right here, and Dan is way up here. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. And he made a house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not the sons of Levi. That was another rule he broke, is that all the priests were supposed to come from the tribe of Levi. And Jeroboam obtained a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. So the main point I'm pointing here is the fact that these kings continued to celebrate the sins of their former kings. Okay, so by ignoring God and allowing idol worship, Jeroboam clung to Jeroboam's sins. So that's basically where we're at. Now let's look at verses 4 and 5. And Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep master, and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams with the wool. By the way, sheep master is the same as saying like a breeder, like a sheep breeder. But it came to pass when Ahab was dead, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So Israel and Judah held some of the most fertile land and strategic military and trade positions in the ancient Middle East, i.e. it's still happening today. No wonder neighboring nations like Moab envied them and constantly attempted to seize the land. Moab lay just southeast of Israel. This map has it on it too. The country had been under Israel's control for some time due to Ahab's strong military leadership. When Ahab died, Mesha, the Moabite king, took the opportunity to rebel. While Israel's next king, Ahaziah, did nothing about the revolt, his successor, Jehoram, decided to take action. He joined forces with Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he went to fight the Moabites. And together Israel and Judah became the Moabites to brink of surrender. When they saw the Moabite king sacrifice his own son and successor, we'll see that when we get to verse 27. Let me just show you. Then he took the eldest son they should have reigned in his stead and offered him for a burnt offering unto the wall, and there was great indignation against Israel, and departed from him and returned to their own land. They withdrew and returned home in disgust, even though they had won the battle. Moab fought many other battles with Israel and Judah. Some of them, in fact, were recorded by Mesha around 840 BC, who carved his exploits on a plaque called the Moabite Stone. That was actually discovered in 1868. It's a not biblical, it's not something biblical, but it's a historical item that kind of confirms certain parts of the Bible. Okay, looking at verse 4 again here. And Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep master and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams with the wool. Looking also at 2 Samuel 8:2. And he smote Moab and measured them with a line, casting them down to the ground. Even with 2 lines measured he to put to death, with 1 full line to keep alive. And so the Moabites became David's servants and brought gifts. That's the brought gifts part. That's why he had, ultimately was paying tribute basically back to Israel based on the fact that Israel had conquered them. We also see that mentioned in Isaiah 16:1 and 2. Sing ye the lamb to the ruler of the land from Selah to wilderness unto the mountain of the daughters of Zion. For it shall be that as a wandering bird cast out of the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon. Arnon was a river. It's right there. Okay, looking at verse 5 again. But it came to pass when Ahab was dead that the king of Moab rebelled against Israel. This is also mentioned in 2 Kings 1:1. Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab. So we have confirmation there. Confirmation of this event comes from the Moabite stone also, set up by Mesha, the king of Moab. We see that mentioned in 1 Kings 16:27. Now the rest of the acts of Omri which he did and his might that he showed, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? This particular note I just mentioned, Omri is dismissed quickly in the biblical account, but is well known in extra-biblical literature. He actually pops up on this Moabite stone, records his conquest of the plains of Moab to the north of the Arnon River. In the Assyrian annals, Israel became known as a Bit Humara, or the house of Amara. From Amara's time and afterward, he also saw to the marriage of his son Ahab to the Phoenician princess Jezebel. You see where he fits in. Daughter of the Sidonian king. Again, indicating some prominence of the dynasty that Omri established. But we'll see again when we get to verse 31 of 1 Kings 16. It came to pass that it hadn't been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took the wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethabel, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. Okay, so that's the setup of this whole scenario. Now we'll get into the actual war. So those 3 countries are going to join forces, which is unusual. But like a lot of people say, that sometimes even if we are at war with each other, like Judah and Israel were kind of at each war religiously, that they would join forces though when a common enemy would come after him. So looking at verses 6 through 10, I'll read through and we'll look at it. The king of Joab went out of Samaria the same time and numbered all Israel. And he went and sent to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as thou art, my people as thy people, and my horses are thy horses. And he said, which way shall we go up? And he answered, the way through the wilderness of Edom. So the king of Israel went, and the king of Judah, and the king of Edom, and they fetched compass of 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the host and for the cattle that followed them. And the king of Israel said, alas, that the Lord hath called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. Without water, they're not going to last long down there, in other words. By the way, fetched a compass, that actually kind of talks about moved along a roundabout road. In other words, they didn't go straight from Moab, as that other map shows you. They kind of came down and came around. Obviously, they could have gone right through here and straight at Moab, but they didn't because they wanted to come in kind of like in a surprise, too, I think. Plus, they had to pick up Edom. So in verses 9 and 10 there, Edom was under Judah's control at that time. Thus they marched with Judah and Israel, making an alliance of 3 kings. So Edom was friendly with Judah. They had an agreement with each other. Looking at verse 7 again. And he went and sent to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as thou art, my people as thy people, and my horses as thy horses. Apparently Jehoshaphat, family ties again brought Jehoshaphat into a military expedition. And also looking at verse 9. So the king of Israel went, and the king of Judah, and the king of Edom, and they fetched a compass of 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the host and for the cattle that followed them. Looking also at 1 Kings 22:47. Another one I forgot. There was no king in Edom. A deputy was king. So he actually wasn't completely a king there, but kind of like he was under the control of Judah. I think in his own people's, maybe in his own mind, he thought he was a king. Apparently, Jehoshaphat had gained the allegiance of the Edomites in a previous Trans-Jordan war that we see in 2 Chronicles 20. So, the setup is ready. Now let's look at verses 11 through 20. I'll read them first, and then we'll look at it. This is going to be talking about the prophet. But Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, here is Elijah, the son of Shaphat, which poured water on the hands of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Edom, went down to him. And Elijah said unto the king of Israel, what have I to do with thee? Get thee to the prophets of thy father and to the prophets of thy mother. Kind of making fun of them there because they were worshiping other gods. So Elijah's going, why are you coming to me? You don't believe in my God. And the king of Israel said unto him, nay, for the Lord hath called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. So maybe we're kind of leaning in the direction that he's going to be rethinking his position on those other kings. And Elijah said, as the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, surely were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, to him he recognized, I would not look toward thee nor see thee. In other words, I would have nothing to do with you, except for the fact you got Jehoshaphat here, who does believe in the right God. But now bring me a minstrel. And it came to pass, when the minstrel played, that the hand of the Lord came upon him. A minstrel is somebody that played music. there were times during worship that very similar to when we sing hymns. They would have a similar thing when a prophet spoke. Verse 16. And he said, Thus saith the Lord, make this valley full of ditches. For thus saith the Lord, you shall not see wind, neither shall you see rain, yet the valley shall be filled with water that you may drink, both ye and your cattle and your beasts. And this is but a light thing in the sight of the Lord. He will deliver the Moabites also into your hands. That would be good news to hear. And he shall smite every fenced city and every choice city, shall fell every good tree, and stop all wells of water, and mar every good piece of land with stones. And it came to pass in the morning, when the meat offering was offered, that behold, there came water by the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water. Okay, Joseph's request for a prophet of the Lord shows how true worship and religious experience in Israel and Judah had declined. In David's day, both the high priest and the prophets gave the king advice, but most of the priests had left Israel. And God's prophets were seen as messengers of doom, that we read there in 1 Kings 22:18. And the king of Israel said unto Joseph, Did I not tell thee that he would prophesy no good concerning me, but evil? So this miracle predicted by Elijah affirmed God's power and authority, validated Elijah's ministry. And when you look at 2 Chronicles 18, King Jehoshaphat of Judah and King Ahab of Israel gave the prophet Micah a similar request, but they ignored God's advice with disastrous results. So it's a good thing they're paying attention here. Verse 11, But Jehoshaphat says, They're not yet a prophet of the Lord. We may inquire of him, and one of the kings of Israel. Some other verses to look at for this one. 1 Kings 19:21. And he returned back from him and took a yoke of oxen, and slew them, and boiled their flesh with the instruments of the oxen, and gave unto the people, and they did eat. And he arose and went after Elijah and ministered unto him. That was Elijah when he realized that he was going to be a successor. He offered an offering from the Lord to thank him in honor to him, and he went after Elijah. And then he became his predecessor, as we saw when we were finishing up 1 Kings. You might note a similar situation in John 13:4 and 5. He rises from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded him. Of course, we're talking about Jesus here. And that he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. He was shown an example here. As we go to verse 13 and 14 of John, You call me Master and Lord, and ye say, Well, so I am. If then your Lord and Master have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. So whenever Joseph's faults might have been in allowing himself to be drawn into dangerous circumstances, he was consistently concerned with spiritual things. As on the previous occasion, we saw back in 1 Kings 22. So here he asked for a true prophet in order that the Lord's will may be known in the entire enterprise. Whether Elijah was ministering in the area or had accompanied the military forces, as was often done in the ancient Near East, is uncertain. So was Elijah already there? Which could be. A lot of times they took the prophets with them, or they had to call for him. Okay, looking at verse 13 again. And Elijah said unto the king of Israel, What have I to do with thee? Get thee to the prophets of thy father and the prophets of thy mother. And the king of Israel said unto him, Nay, for the Lord hath called these three kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. So that he knew that God had called them together, even though he'd been worshiping other idols. And that's what Elijah was kind of commenting on. We see that back in 1 Kings 22:6-11. And the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said unto them, Shall I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or should I forbear? And they say, Go up, for the Lord shall deliver thee in the hand of the king. And Joseph said, Is there not here a prophet of the Lord, besides that we may inquire? To hear Jehoshaphat was actually saying that those 400 prophets are not worth listening to. That's the prophets he was talking about. And also jump into verses 22 through 25. And the Lord said unto him, wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all the prophets. And he said, thou shalt persuade him to prevail also. Go forth and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets, and the Lord hath spoken evil concerning thee. But Zedekiah the son of Chenaanah went near and smote Micaiah on the cheek, and said, which way went the Spirit of the Lord from me to speak unto thee? And Micaiah said, behold, thou shalt see in that day when thou shalt go into a inner chamber to hide thyself. Meaning that Micaiah was basically prophesying that his days were numbered as to being able to be a false prophet. Some other examples in Judges 10:14. Go and cry unto your gods you have chosen. Let them deliver you into the time of your tribulation. That was God talking to, who was it? That was back in Judges, the Amalekites, basically under the children of Israel. And at that time, they had taken up gods of the Zidonians and the Amalekites and the Moabites. So God was saying, hey, why are you coming to me for? Go to those other guys. Another example is Ruth 1:15. And she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back under her people and under her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. That's, of course, as Ruth and Naomi was talking to her, saying that she had, that she was heading back to her hometown in Bethlehem. And why don't you daughters just go back to your families? But they were worshiping false gods. And Ruth, of course, wanted to worship the one true God, so she went with Naomi back to Bethlehem. That's that example there. And another example in Ezekiel 14:3. Son of man, these men have set up their idols in their heart, put a stumbling block on iniquity before their face. Should I be inquired at all by them? So in other words, they were already worshiping other gods. So the true God was not going to hear them as long as they were worshiping other gods and didn't put them away. That was the whole point of this particular. So Elijah was, with an S, was really surprised to see the northern kingdom actually coming to him. Verse 15. But now bring me a minstrel, and it came to pass when the minstrel played that the hand of the Lord came upon him. This also happened in 1 Samuel 16:23. And it came to pass when an evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took a harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. In Old Testament times, music often accompanied the giving of prophecy. There's another example in 1 Chronicles 25:1. Moreover, David and the captains of the host separated to the service of the sons of Asaph, and of Herman, and of Jeduath, which should prophesy with harps, with palm trees, with cymbals, and the number of the workmen according to their service. So a company of music during worship and also during the delivering of a prophecy. So Elijah's call for a minstrel or a musician is not evidence that he was ecstatic or as sometimes suggested. Elijah was simply setting a proper atmosphere for spiritual things in the midst of the dire conditions. Music was an important part of Israel's spiritual experience, whether individually or in situations of formal religious worship. Okay, on to verses 16 through 25. And he said, Thus saith the Lord, make this valley full of ditches. That was water canals, basically, like irrigation. For thus saith the Lord, you shall not see wind, neither shall you see rain, that thou shalt be filled with water, that you may drink, both ye and your cattle and your beasts. And this is but a light thing in the sight of the Lord, who will deliver the Moabites also into your hands. And ye shall smite every fenced city, and every choice city, shall fell every good tree, and stop all wells of water, and mar every good piece of land with stones. We're going to talk about that. That's an interesting scenario. And it came to pass in the morning, when the meat offering was offered, that behold, there came water by the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water. And when all the Moabites heard that the kings were come up to fight against them, they gathered all that were able to put on armor and upward and stood in the border. And they rose up early in the morning, and the sun shone upon the water, and the Moabites saw the water on the other side as red as blood. And they said, "This is blood, the kings are surely slain, and they have smitten one another. Now therefore Moab to the spoil." And when they came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose up and smote the Moabites, so that they fled before them. But they went forward, smiting the Moabites even into their country. And they beat down the cities, and on every good piece of land cast every man his stone, and filled it, and they stopped all the wells of the water, and felled all the good trees. Only in Kirshasaiath left they the stones thereof, howbeit the slingers went about and smote it. So going back to verse 16, looking a little bit, he said, "Thus say, make these valleys full of ditches." Ditches are basically water canals. We see a similar situation in Jeremiah 14:3. "Their nobles have sent their little ones to the waters. They came to the pits, found no water. They returned with their vessels empty. They were ashamed and confounded and covered their heads." So this was definitely a way to confuse the enemy with the lack of water. But in this case, God provided the water. And verse 19, "You shall smite every fenced city, every choice city, and shall fell every good tree, and stop all wells of water, and mar every good piece of land with stones." This wartime direction goes far beyond the normal limits allowed in battle situations. Typically, Deuteronomy 20:19 and 20 talks about this. "When thou shalt besiege a city a long time, and making war against it, take it, thou shalt not destroy the trees thereof by forcing an axe against them, for thou mayest eat of them." In other words, any fruit-bearing trees, you would not cut them down. "Thou shalt not cut them down, for the tree of the field is man's life, to employ them in a siege. Only the trees that thou knowest that there be not trees of meat, thou shalt destroy and cut them down. And thou shalt build bulwarks against the city that maketh war with thee until it be subdued." So it's only to be used for the act of combat. And here they're actually cutting them down after the battle's already over. Verse 20, "And it came to pass in the morning when the meat offering was offered, that behold, there came water by the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water." Similar thing happened back in Exodus 29:39 and 40. "The one lamb thou shalt offer in the morning, and the other lamb thou shalt offer at evening. And with the one lamb 1/10 deal of flour mingled with the 4th part of a hin of beaten oil, and the 4th part of a hin of wine for a drink offering." So they were sacrificing to the Lord to recognize his power. And it was after he did that they actually got the water. The meat offering, that is, the daily food or grain offering, was one of the 2 sacrifices that the priests were required to offer every day. So they're still following the rules that God had set up for them, even when they were going against war. Verse 25, "And they beat down the cities, and on every good piece of land cast every man his stone, and filled it. And they stopped all the walls of the water, and fell all the good trees. Only in Kirshasaiath left they stones thereof, howbeit the slingers went about and smote it." On every good piece of land cast every man his stone means the Israelites scattered stones over the land to make it unfit for farming. They also filled the wells and cut down the fruit trees. Some other verses on this in Isaiah 16:7. "Therefore shall Moab howl for Moab, every one shall howl for the foundations of Kirshasaiath. Shall ye mourn, surely they are stricken." Almost a prophecy here. Also Jeremiah 48:31 and 36. "Therefore will I howl for Moab, and will cry out for all Moab. My heart shall mourn for the men of Kirias. Therefore my heart shall sound for Moab like pipes, and my heart shall sound like pipes for the men of Kirias, because the riches that he had gotten are perished." So they didn't. They realized that their fighting against God was not going to work out for them, and they ended up being poor because of it, or desolate. Okay, the last 2 verses. verse 26 and 27. When the king of Moab saw that the battle was too sore for him, he took with him 700 men that drew swords to break through even unto the king of Edom, but they could not. Some other verses on this. The king of Moab probably decided to fight the Edomite forces because of Edom's lesser forces and to punish Edom for siding with the allied Israelite armies. But that was not successful. And also verse 27, then he took his eldest son that should have reigned in his stead and offered him for a burnt offering upon the wall. And there was great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. What a sad situation where the one king killed his son in protest against this not doing well at this war. Some other verses on this in Deuteronomy 18:10. Thou shalt not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that uses divination, observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch. Basically what he was doing is sacrificing his son, hoping that was going to help his situation. That was completely against the Bible. And Amos 2:1, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he burned the bones of the king of Edom into lime. And Micah 6:7, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000 of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Now it's being, in other words, you should not do those things. The Moabite king's desperation sacrifice of his son is often paralleled in the literature of the ancient Near East. This verse provides an instance where the Bible supplements the information from secular history that Moabite stone I mentioned earlier. The Israelites left the scene with disgust after what they saw. So, that was the war between Israel, Judah, and Edom against Moab. And how much that they had God on their side, and they were successful. So, dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for this lesson and for helping me to be able to understand a little bit better some of the ways that when we the overall message we see here, Lord, I think is the fact that when we follow your ways, we're always going to make out better than if we try to follow our own ways. And we should only be worshiping you and no other idols. And we love you and we thank you so much for all you do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, on to verse 4 tomorrow. Chapter 4, I mean. And we'll see what happens there.